First of all, thank you for all being here. When I left Michigan, it was cloudy and about 50 degrees. And so I know you all don't have to be in this room. Outside is beautiful. I want to thank Dr. Sartain and Dr. DeLeo for bringing me an ABR as well. You all probably know this, but I have to say that ABR is a national treasure, so it's really an honor to be here today to read to you. I'm going to bounce around quite a bit and read from my latest collection, the Cineaste. I'll probably close with a couple of poems from an earlier collection, the Quantum Lyrics. And then in between, I'll try a few new poems out on you all. And a couple that I haven't actually read. I haven't even figured out how to read yet, but I'll try them here and see how it goes. The Cineaste is a collection of ekphrastic poems, poems written about another art form, and the art form that I chose to write about is film. And in writing those poems, sometimes I will write about the film and I'll change the ending of the film. I'll cast myself as a protagonist or antagonist in the film. And the idea primarily is sort of engaging with it and thinking about it in a way that is different from the actual experience of the original art form. And so the working title of this was Auteur. And I was thinking initially, I'm just going to write poems about these great films by great filmmakers. And as I started writing into the project, I realized that there were some films that I loved, but I had nothing else to add, to those films. So there are no Bergman films. There are no Hitchcock films. And sometimes I would find that also there are films that I was writing about that weren't high art films. So I was writing about blaxploitation films, or I think of Mel Brooks as an auteur, but Mel Brooks films, So, I had a lot of fun with it. But my love for film started when I was a kid, and I grew up in a Midwestern blue-collar town, and I was the first in my family to go to college. I grew up in a very blue-collar family. And when I would go to the movies, it was sort of an event for me. So this is the theater that I used to go to see films when I was a kid. It doesn't look like much. But the Civic Theater in Akron, Ohio is one of the few atmospheric theaters, Spanish Moor designed. And so it looked like that on the outside. And then once I would go in, this is what it would look like. And so it has, so this was, in my mind, this is what going to the movies was like, right? And so I had a similar experience in Ann Arbor, Michigan, going to the Michigan Theater to see a restored edition of Metropolis. And when the theater that was shown in was something like this, it was a 1927 theater that had a hydraulic organist, organ with an organist. They had the organist that composed music for that night's performance, and he played throughout the entire performance. The restored edition of Metropolis is about 3 hours long. And so, he had tails and, tucks and tails when he played. Folks came from all over the state. It was a line around the block. When people sat there, though, the thing I noticed is that no one got up. No one was checking their phones. When people got up to go to the bathroom, they were kind of crab walking out, looking at the screen, and crab walking back in. And after the performance, it was giving them a standing ovation. And it was something about that evening that reminded me of my experience of going to movies as a kid. And so, and I got to go to this with two other poets, Viby Francis and Matthew Osman. This is Metropolis Restored Edition, Michigan Theater, Ann Arbor, September 14th, 2010. Listening to the organist play feels like eavesdropping inside the mind of a giant. A bipolar giant whose emotions are so fragile, I want to climb up her arm to lay my hand on her shoulder. The screen has yet to capture the first gray glimpse of skyline. Music envelops the theater, enclosing the city in a throat filled with indifference. A city under a chiaroscuro of sunlight and shadow, imagined by those working in the depths of the metropolis. A sort of giant, too, with some real issues to work out. I remember watching as a child in downtown Akron, Wild Oscar play the organ. Ascending from beneath the stage at the Lowe's Theater long before it was renamed the Civic Theater, and even longer before it needed restoring to save its life. Wild Oscar would play before the feature or during the silent Crazy Cat shorts preceding the main event. Going to the movies seemed monumental. Live music, opening acts, serpentine lines around the block. When Oscar played, I wonder now if he was happy or was he beneath the stage the whole time toiling like the workers in the film tonight, preserving a magic moviegoers still believe in the way voters and lovers do not. Like many children, I believed I would do something with my potential once I simply grew up. Like many adults, I stayed a child, potential hanging around like a shadow. But every now and then, like tonight, I catch up with my shadow self and show up in a theater to see a restored edition of an old film about workers holed up in a factory for too many hours and lovers separated like most lovers by their ideas. One worker steps offline, reprieved by a brother worker, and suddenly the sky appears, and the whole rectilinear contraption, and I mean their lives, not just this plant, comes tumbling down, an arcade of beliefs in ruins. I wonder what it all means to this audience whose laughter rings a bit condescending in the cued moments of melodrama. It's so easy to laugh at the banana peels laid before the lives of others. Sad to see the young act too old to feel naive. No suspension of disbelief. But not me. Movies provide my last safe playground. Tonight, for instance, when the organist descends to play and the lights expire and the projection whirs to action, I'm as excited as a boy again. When the organ ascends, what am I but as dazed as the workers climbing from the depths of the metropolis? A little disappointed, filled with questions, wondering how will I go on with my day's work outside and all that natural light. So, my favorite film as a child, and still today I think of it as like a perfect film, is The Red Balloon. The Red Balloon, 1956 film, actually is a short film, it's only like 30 minutes. And how many people have seen The Red Balloon? It's not enough people have seen it, but good audience still. It's on YouTube. You can see it. It's like 30 minutes, and I'm telling you, it's an amazing film. You would not believe that it was done in 1956, particularly when you see this final shot. I'm trying to think. Do I have another? No, sorry. I had another clip. So the one thing I'll say about The Red Balloon is that Albert Lemarice, the filmmaker, he cast his son to play Pascal, this kid who has this balloon that he finds on the way to school. And he finds the balloon. The balloon seems to have magical properties. The balloon kind of becomes his friend or acts like a pet and obeys his commands, follows him around. Other kids get jealous of him, and they want to try to take the balloon from him. The balloon kind of stands in as a metaphor for, innocence, imagination, and the kids in their jealousy try to take something and they realize this is something that cannot be snuffed out of little Pascal. So this is The Red Balloon. Albert Lemarice, 1956. Tribes of boys are jealous of the one tethered to the red balloon. Adults don't seem to understand him either. So the boy runs with his balloon trailing behind him. Even when he opens his grip, the balloon obeys and, as if it had legs, runs alongside him. Can you see it? Even in the silences between them, even when the boy is not there, even when the boy cannot come to play, the balloon, the boy's secret, this one boy's one friend remains loyal, rising and falling right along with the boy. The balloon keeps returning around every corner, down every alleyway, and as more of its fidelity reveals, the other boys try to destroy its elan. But the balloon simply gathers more balloons, and something common to this boy appears fantastic to others. He gathers the strings attached to the balloon bouquet. He takes flight over the city until he's even more of a mystery in the squinting eyes of the boys looking into the sun, which gleams like a future too bright to look into. The boys wield slingshots to bring him back down to the soil which does not stir beneath their shoes like the clouds do beneath his feet as he continues to float beyond their skin-knee jealousies. As the rectrices of his feet steer clear of their stones, and then their mouths hang agape. And then there's no hope. His floating away, his act of no act at all for him is already too many octaves above their voices. So Do the Right Thing. Another one on another film that I think is pretty much a perfect film. It's a beautiful movie by Spike Lee. In 1989, the film came out on the 25th anniversary of Do the Right Thing. We got the verdict for Eric Garner. It was very much similar to the last scene in Do the Right Thing with the character Raider Rahim. How many people have seen Do the Right Thing in here? Pretty good. Still, more people should see this film too. It's an important movie, you know. Hot day in the summer in Brooklyn. The main character, Mookie, played by Spike Lee, works at Sal's Pizzeria. It's a very ethnically diverse community, and Sal's is kind of the place where everyone kind of congregates in the community. And then there's a character played by Giancarlo Esposito, Gus, if you guys know Breaking Bad. It was one of his earlier performances, and Bugging Out is his name, and Bugging Out complains because there are portraits of different Italian Americans on the wall in Sal's and no African Americans in this community that's predominantly African American, and his patronage is predominantly African American. And so he calls for a boycott, and they get into it. But later in the film, because of the rising tension, the rising heat of the summer, there's also this character named Raider Rahim, who's walking through the community with this boom box, and he's blasting Public Enemy's Fight the Power throughout the film. He's kind of like this silent figure. If you guys know Night of the Hunter, it's kind of a filmic quote from that with Robert Mitchum, with the love and the hate tattoos from Mitchum's. And so, when they have a riot breaks out, and cops come, and the cops put Raider Rahim in a chokehold. This is after Sal and Raider Rahim get into it inside of Sal's. Sal takes a baseball bat and breaks Raider Rahim's boombox, and all hell breaks loose. And I actually have a small clip from the film. Volume. Can we get volume? Hmm.
How much? You've been coming in here at least 3 times a day. What are you, a retard? It's $1.50. That's not what's the cheese in that motherfucker, man. Extra cheese is $2.
Sorry.
$2, yeah. Hey, get that. Movie.
What?
I'm getting the brothers up on the wall.
And that's Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, I'm getting the brothers up on the wall here.
You want brothers on the wall? It's your own place. You can put your own. You can put your brothers and uncles and nieces and nephews, your stepfather, stepmother, whoever you want. See? But this is my history. American Italians on the wall. Huh? You. Don't stop.
Don Tachiro.
Yeah, that might be fine, Sal, but you own this. Rarely do I see any American Italian people here. Well, I see black folks. So since we spend much money here, we do have to say.
Look at the trouble.
You making trouble? You making trouble? Yeah, I'm trouble. I'm making trouble.
Just tell me what you're talking about. Suppose I busted your head. How would you?
Okay. You want to get your friend out here? Oh, you gonna kick me out now? Or you gonna kick me out, huh?
I'm not kicking you out. You're kicking yourself out.
Look, what's some brothers up on the wall, you know? Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, you know, Michael Jordan, tomorrow.
Come on, get him out.
I'm trying to get him out. I paid for it. I know you paid for it. All right. Keep me in the head. Keep me out. Yeah.
Roger Guenveur Smith.
Yeah, look, I paid my, look, boycott Sal. No, boycott Sal.
You mentioned the boycott swing.
Boycott Sal. No, what you laughing at? I paid for my site. No, I spent much money in there. What are you trying to...
Spike. Okay. Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee, 89. The days were skillet on a red-hot eye of a stove. The men on the corner, the couple in their apartment, the kids playing under a fire hydrant's relief were all sitting, loving, or playing in a skillet. Heat rose off the assonance of summer language. Some called it music, others called it fire. The days were a skillet, but the nights were a match lighting the gas. No moon appeared, only steam rising off the sidewalks from the day. Feet danced on the skillet, and smoke alarms sounded. Moths fierce as kids at play on a summer day burst from musty closets. People were evicted, put out like butter sliding across a skillet's face. Most of us were outside by then, swatting bees, swatting flies. We outlived the lifespan of giraffes and cheetahs made for this weather. Or we sat on our stoops, indolent but defiant, simply escaping the drama of our own lives. Even those indoors without air conditioning, would like to believe at least, escaped the heat somehow. Mookie, to cool her fire, melted ice cubes on Tina's nipples. Radio Raheem stole ink off of Robert Mitchum's knuckles. He took the heat too, casting love and hate into digital bling. When did Soul Brother become an anachronism too hot for air-conditioned conversation? And Sal's Pizzeria bugging out bugs. Sal, why ain't no brothers up on your wall? Smiley, auguring smoke before nightfall, carried matches. The days of skillet on a red-hot eye of a stove. Later, ICOP has Radio Raheem in a chokehold. Later, we will light candles for Radio Raheem. If a man takes a baseball bat to another man's property, that's a skillet too. If a man throws a barrel through a plate glass window, others will follow. A Pyrrhic victory is a pyre, a life possession set ablaze to save lives. Catharsis is the moth's flight toward the flame, fluttering in the spotlight, or first fluttering, then finding the power to flutter, but consumed by the heat until all we know of its shimmer is how one smolders to survive. So, I don't know. This is a kind of an obscure film, but also one of my favorite films. And it's a Korean film by this great Korean filmmaker, Park Chan-wook, who did this Revenge trilogy. Actually, believe it or not, Spike Lee did a remake of this film. It's not as good as Park Chan-wook's, but it was fun. And it's about a guy who is out one night with some friends. He's a binge drinker. And he gets kidnapped. And the guys who kidnap him keep him for 15 years. And he's in an apartment building. He's hypnotized, he's drugged. In the meantime, his entire family's been murdered except for his daughter. And because he's been missing all this time, people assume that he's the one who killed the family. And so the police have been looking for him. And then one day, without explanation, they release him back out. But they put him in a suitcase and leave him, and he kind of emerges, and he's trying to figure out what's going on with his life. And he's still under the control of the hypnotist, though. And he's trying to solve the murder, figure out what's going on with him, break the spell. And we find out later that part of the revenge in this film is for something he did to the guy, this guy who set this whole thing up, something he did to him in high school. And his guy's getting revenge on that. That's a scene from the film. And this is Old Boy. Park Chan-wook, 2003. If one rainy night you find yourself leaving a phone booth and you meet a man with a lavender umbrella, resist your desire to follow him, to seek shelter for the night in his solace. Later, don't fall victim to the hypnotist narcotic of clarity, which proves a curare for the heart. Her salve is merely a bandage under which memories pulse. Resist the taste for something still alive in your first meal. Resist the crave for a touch of a hand from your past. We live some memories, and some memories are planted. There's only so much space for the truth and the fabrications to spread out in one's mind. When there's no more space to grow desperate, you'll ask if practicing love for years in your mind prepares you for the moment, if practicing to defend one's life is the same as living. You'll hold up captive in a hotel room for 15 years and learn to find a man within you, which will prove a painful introduction to the trance into which you were born. Better to stay under the spell of your guilt than to forget. You've already released your pain onto the world. Don't believe there's some joy in forgetting. There's no joy in the struggle to forget. And what appears as an endless verdant field only spreads across a building's rooftop. Your peaceful sleep could be a fetal position which secures you in a suitcase in this field. A bell rings and you fall out of this luggage like clothes you no longer fit. Now what to do? You remember when you were the man who fit those clothes, but you've forgotten this world. Even forgotten scenes from your life leave shadows of the memory, haunting your spirit until, within a moment's glance, strangers passing you on the street observe history in your eyes. Experience lingers through acts of forgetting, small acts of love or trauma falling from the same place. Whether memory comes in the form of a stone or a grain of sand, they both sink in water. A tongue, even if it were, say, sworn to secrecy, or if it were cut from one's mouth, yes, even without a mouth to envelop its truth, the tongue continues to confess. Okay, so I'm working on a series of poems that play off of The Tempest. I'll read one of these poems. There's a character in The Tempest who is referenced a great deal, but who doesn't appear actually in the play. It's Caliban's mother, Sycorax. And these poems are a contemporized version of these characters. Watching the young men who have been shot at the hands of police, what often happens when we get the news reports is that we first get the justification for the shooting. And then later we find out, biographies of these people. The mothers are the ones who are usually on camera explaining who their son actually was. And so Caliban is a stand-in for those young men. Sycorax, Caliban's mother, is a composite of those mothers. So I'll read this poem. And the poem, after that's a depiction of Caliban by Jaman Hansu playing him. I'm not going to play the clip because our audio is not that great. This is the depiction of Sycorax, usually like as a hag, and it's all through Prospero's voice. But this is what the poem looks like on the page, and it's a poem that I haven't really figured out how to read yet, but I'm going to read it and try it out with you all. All right, Window into Sycorax. What's known to others but not known to what's known to others and known to Sycorax is my collarbone, still in his onesie, posed a threat. Perhaps it was his hands, much too large for a newborn, which made him look like a grown man. His frontal lobe stuck out, heavy with thoughts, his eyes wide open. He looked around as if he could see auras of others who kept their thoughts to themselves. What's known to others and not known to Sycorax, she will never be accepted among us. What's not known to others, but known to Sycorax. Because I saw a crow in the sky, because the moon didn't show its face. All of time divides between my loves and my regrets. That's why I know. That's why you're just guessing. How far did the thread unspool as it led me down the path back home? Yes, a thread unraveled my coat all the way here. It was cold when I started. It was temperate once I stopped. How many heels have I worn down on my journey? I remember a future as if I had been here before. My mother said I had been here before. Now, finally, I believe her as I look into the face of my son. Sometimes a spell is not a hex. What's not known to others and not known to Sycorax is how she drifts in dreams she has yet to discern, how the wind calls when she's in danger, trying to warn her of lies falling as blithely from miles as confetti from hotel windows, how a man will look over his shoulder to watch her walk past him on the street. She never looks back at him. She's not curious about a him, how she forgets the bewilderment of hope once experience consumes her, how she fuels every step with love, which keeps her on a path no one else can follow. And so another project I'm working on, for the first time in my life, I'm in between two book projects. So this is about a woman by the name of Betty Jean Owens, who not too many people know. Betty Jean Owens was an African-American woman who was raped by 4 white men, Patrick Jean Scarborough, David Irwin Beagles, Ali Stoudemire, and William Ted Collinsworth in Tallahassee, Florida in May of 1959. She was a student at Florida State, at FAMU, Florida A&M. The trial was a landmark case covered at the time by the BBC and international news outlets. This was the first case on record in which a jury of 12 white men found white male assailants guilty of raping a black woman. This poem is my attempt to capture the emotion and the moment. This is the moment after the rape when she goes home and tells her father what happened to her. And this poem is called Afterward, AFTERWARD, but not afterward, AFTERWORD. Afterward, but not afterward. Later, I lowered my head to my father's chest, the hollow where I hear his heart stop. If stop meant speed to a stop, if hearts could gasp like a mouth when events stun the heart to a stop for a moment. His eyes fill with anger. Then, collecting himself, he rises up to slump his shoulders back down. The fists, the eyes, nothing can raise up, nothing feels essential. A black body raising up in the South and all, to a life starting here, ethereal yet flesh and all. And even if you could, what all good would it do, the damage and all? Blackbirds flock, dulcet yet mourning, an uproar of need, a cry of black, but blue is not the sky in which they gender. My God, if life is not pain, no birth brought me into this world. Or could life begin here where it ends? No shelter, no comfort, no ride home. And must I go on saying more? Pointing them out in a court of men? Didn't the trees already finger the culprits? Creatures make a way where there is no way. That way, after I lean into what's left of me, and must I? Yes, you must. Explain over and over how my blood came to rest here. My body, now labeled evidence, shows what I have yet to say. Okay, so I'm going to close with a poem from Quantum Lyrics. And I want to say thank you once again for being such an attentive, beautiful audience. Thank you all again for the invite. Jeff Sartain, yesterday, he drove 2 hours to pick me up to Austin, Texas, and drove 2 hours back here. And in the car, he told me that the day before that was his birthday. And it made me smile to hear that because the day before, I spent the entire day sort of thinking about my father. And I have another friend, my father died on October 22nd of 2005. I have another friend whose sister died that same day. And so that was kind of in my mind. I thought it was great that I have now something else to remember on that day. So this is an elegy to my father. Quantum lyrics are poems that the theme is, it uses quantum physics as part of the extended metaphor. The structure of scientific revolutions. I placed the trombone back on its stand after attempting Summertime in C major. Childhood memories of band camp and lessons streamed to my embouchure, hands and gut. After the ringing in my head has passed and the notes settle, it seems at my feet. I linger on a photograph of my family, my parents, brothers, and nephew. I suppose I stare off into it longer than I mean to, thinking of my father, dead 8 months now. The color image blurs a bit on this print, not recalling his smile as I recall it in memory. And also, the camera didn't know this would be his last photo, so the occasion was captured with people moving like apparitions in the background, more than the spirit of the man in the midst of it all. Even with digital cameras, there's still a pointless dotting flesh on the faces of my family. I shake my head to clear the trance and turn on the television. First, news of a woman raped. The pundits keep the stress on alleged. I think of all the women who are watching TV now. I turn the channel to a rerun of CSI. All this technology, yet we still can't prove rape. What's the use of suspending disbelief? I turn the TV off and sit back down to the horn, but it's still next to the photo. This time I notice my father's hand at rest on my nephew's shoulder. My nephew might be practicing his cello as I sit in front of this brass, which turns to folk art in my hands. I don't really play anymore, you know. I once thought music would be my life, and it's simply too easy to try to play and say, that's enough. Too easy to say, at least my nephew plays strings. Nothing changes that easily. It's the way the mouthpiece refuses to kiss me back, how the ceiling fan whirs in the room, yet humidity hangs in the air. A need builds in me only after struggle builds around me, a mythical ether challenging this horn with its song stuck in its throat. Memory, the present moment, and all the notes falling between them, struggling to get out. Thank you very much. Can I stay here? Or, I think we do Q&A now. Is that right? If you have questions. Yes, I'll take them in order. So when did I have a passion for writing? I'm pausing because I think the honest answer is that I probably had a passion for it when I was a kid, but I never believed that I would ever write a book or that I would be a writer, right? And so I kind of tamped that desire, that passion down for a long time. And it wasn't until I was in college that I had a professor who was someone who really kind of sparked the belief in me that I could be a writer. It was a class that had nothing really to do with creative writing, but she had given us assignments of both writing sonnets and also writing annotations about poetry. She was considered the toughest professor in that department. She had only given a C as the highest grade the semester before. And your provost just left, but she had gone, the students went to the provost in protest of this. And so I was very scared of her. And so she, but she loved my work, my writing. And I remember she kind of walked in one day and sort of railed about how bad the papers were and the poems were. But she said, but there was this one. And then she, read mine. And for me, it was a big deal. That professor was kind of an outlier in that department. So like the 80s, a very open lesbian, no bra wearing, kind of butch dyke, and everyone in the department was pretty much, even as scholars, they were like Republicans. And so, and I was the only black English major at the school. And so we just kind of saw each other. And when she acknowledged me in that way for the first time while I was there, I knew that I was going to be an English major, but it was also the first time I thought, maybe I'll be a writer. I can write, So I think that was the real spark my sophomore year in college. Yeah. Yes.
From start to finish, what's the average time it takes you to finish a piece of work? And how do you decide that you're really finished? Like, do you forever edit? Or?
Yeah. I think I have to kind of, it's changed for me. Let's say that first of all. And I tell my grad students this all the time because in the graduate workshop, what happens is that they come in every week and we sit around on, seminar table, they bring work in, and we're constantly doing, the assessment of the work. And I tell them that it's unnatural, for me to write that fast, to think that every other week I'm going to have a finished piece. But when I was in grad school, I did the same thing. And now I have the luxury of not having that kind of pressure on me. And so I'm a pretty slow writer. It takes me quite a while to actually get the work out. And I never feel like it's done. I mean, I was editing even as I was reading to you from these books. So I'm constantly, I can find tweaks of things. And I think that's typical for most writers. It's like you kind of feel like you're constantly, there are things that you're satisfied with, there's things that you feel like you've approximated the emotion that you're trying to get at in that piece. And you've probably been as precise as you think you can be that day. And then some time passes and you might see into it in a different way, and there might be even another tweak that you can add to it. So it's an ongoing process. But I think the most important thing to think about when you think about being finished in a way is to think about intentionality and think about the conversation you're trying to have with the world. And so if you're thinking that, okay, this piece facilitates that conversation at that point, then you feel like, okay, I'm ready to share it. I'm ready to bring it out into the world. But I wouldn't hold on to that kind of pressure to think it's got to be this little jewel box of a perfect thing. Yeah. What else? Anything? Anyone else? Yes.
A lot of money riding on this.
Okay.
So answer carefully. What does the A stand for in Amen?
The toughest question of all. No, it's Aaron. Was that the wrong answer?
Yeah.
You say what?
I had money on it.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, yes.
Are there any current movies that you want to write on? How you were doing with the other movies?
Yeah.
Got an example?
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, there are films that, there's a film. I have a friend who works in film, and I was able to stream a film that hasn't come out yet. I don't know. Do you guys know Nate Parker, this filmmaker actor? He did Birth of a Nation a few years ago, and it had some controversy. in the court case and stuff. And so this guy, he was a producer, wanted me to see this film called American Skin. And American Skin is a film by Nate Parker. He stars in it with Amari Hardwick. And what happens in that film is that he plays a father, he's got a son, and they're in a car, he gets stopped by the cops. The routine stop goes bad, obviously, and then the son gets killed. Some time passes, and the cop gets, verdict of not guilty, and it's kind of the cliche story we hear now. But he, in this group of men, they take over the police station, and they hold this mock trial, which sounds like a horrible idea for a story, but it actually works. And so I'm still kind of wrapping my mind around that film and that concept of this, and like why does that work? Why did that bad idea in my mind seem to play out so well? And it was mainly about the tension. And one of the things I think about in that film is that what happens in the movie is that he creates this controlled environment in which there's this honest conversation across racial lines, gender lines, even within racial groups, they're arguing. And I was thinking, like, we don't get to see this. Like, we never have this kind of discourse in public anymore. And I think that's why it works. So yeah, bless you. Yeah, there feels like there's something I would like to explore further, but I think it's worth an ekphrastic, attempt. So yeah.
Maybe for some of the students you've used this term twice, ekphrasis, ekphrastic.
Yeah.
Maybe is this something that they should be thinking about in terms of their writing or poets, and as someone who's in comparative literature, is finding the connections among the different arts?
Yeah.
This is one of those ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good way to engage other art forms and to think about it. It's an old tradition. It's like old on a Grecian urn is kind of an ekphrastic poem. It's really the idea of looking at. It kind of goes back to the last question. Looking at a piece of art and thinking, is there anything else that I can say about this that we may not have the opportunity to say through this medium? So sometimes, if you think about like going to a museum and you're looking at a painting and it's like this kind of static plastic art, like what happens if we write about that, or if we do a dance about that, or if we compose music about that, and we put it into a temporal art form interpretation of that? What comes out of that? And so I think in terms of ekphrastic thinking, in the ekphrasis, is that what happens is that you have this opportunity now to engage that art form in a different way. And I think particularly when we're in an institution, that we're thinking, okay, if I'm studying this, I'm talking about this art form, the way to engage it is to write a paper about it, right? But the other way to engage it is to think about another art form that might be in conversation with it. And so it's a different way to sort of engage it.
Cool. Okay, I have two things. First, let's thank Ben for the presentation.